With that, maybe while we pause for Mr. Coleman, I know I saw Lisa Sasso on. Lisa, if I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit about MMSD, but I do want to mention that the work that we're doing here with this conceptual planning for schoolyard redevelopment is sponsored by the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. And I'll just ask Lisa to provide a little bit of background on why MMSD is investing in schoolyard redevelopment projects.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Lisa Sasto. I'm a project manager with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, like Justin just said. So MMSD, our kind of two main missions are to do flood management and then help reduce the risk of overflows through our water reclamation facilities. So when it rains, all that water either goes into our local waterways or our two treatment plants. And where I come in is stormwater management. And so we do that through green infrastructure, which are those features being put on your schoolyard to soak up that water naturally. And MMSD is interested in green infrastructure, and especially with schools. A lot of MPS schools and other schools in our area are very heavily, have concrete or asphalt, so water runs off with pollutants and it goes to our local waterways or treatment plants. And our goal is to help soak up that water to take some of that pressure off our system. But with schools, another benefit is that every year there's new students, there's teachers, parents, community members who can all learn about green infrastructure, learn about particularly like Michigan. So there's really the environmental benefit and the social benefit as well. So thank you all for coming to the meeting today. I'm excited to see your draft plan.
Cool, thank you, Lisa. So Mr. Coleman, are you on? I saw you just log in. You're gonna have to unmute yourself if,
yes.
Perfect.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Coleman, Principal Zablocki Community School. Thank you for all joining us. And I'm sorry for being late. I just had a little trouble with the link.
No worries. Cool. Thank you for that. Are there any elected officials on the call that we'd like to? I know there was a couple. Alderman Dimitrovic had RSVP'd for this. Is anyone on the call that would like to introduce themselves? Elected officials, I should say. Okay. Great. Okay, with that being said, let's jump into this. Okay, so Reflow is a nonprofit that works on community-based water projects. My name is Justin Hagerty. I'm the executive director and environmental engineer at Reflow. We have 5 programs. The program that that's relevant to today's conversation is Green and Healthy Schools. We also work, I'll mention, with the Green and Healthy Schools program, we work with a couple of dozen schools. Each year we work with 5 in partnership with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District and many others to redevelop schoolyards. We also have developed the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee, which I'll mention in a bit, but Reflow also works on vacant lot projects with the city of Milwaukee, redeveloping them to be community assets. Our Water Stories program shares digital water stories from across Milwaukee from many different organizations, and that's a resource available for schools as well. Reflow also works with urban agriculture projects and groups. This is a picture of Alice's Garden, installing a large underground cistern through a community volunteer build day. And then we also hire 10 high school students each year with the other nonprofit Arts at Large, where these students are working to support all of these different programs, in particular the Green and Healthy Schools program, where high school students from Bradley Tech are building the signs and benches and other activities that further support the school projects as well. Also background on Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee. Several years ago, Reflow and others helped to come together to organize this network of local practitioners, agencies, and funders that are coming together on a routine basis to talk about how we can share resources and collectively help grow greener, healthier schools in the Milwaukee area. Each year we organize this large Green Schools Conference. Last year was about 300 people. Unfortunately, this year we had to cancel it, but we are working on replacing a component of the conference with a webinar dedicated to local water curricular activities. So if you're interested, I know the link that was shared also provides the option for people to opt in to Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee newsletters and information. And that's one particular resource that will be shared in the coming months as well. And just for us all to kind of better visualize what Green and Healthy Schools and the consortium is, the top left picture is a picture of what a lot of urban schools in the Milwaukee area look like. A lot of asphalt as a result of, you know, maintenance decisions made many years ago, many decades ago to reduce maintenance. But we now know that there are social emotional impacts to this. There's environmental impacts, like Lisa said, from a stormwater management perspective. All of the stormwater that hits a surface like this goes down into the sewer infrastructure and leads to flooding and combined sewer overflows and other issues. And so schools don't have to look like this. This is a picture on the right-hand side of Maryland Avenue Montessori on the east side of Milwaukee, where they removed asphalt several years ago and replaced it with green infrastructure and trees and other really great features. And the lessons learned, you know, are further expanding how students and the arts can be involved and engaged through this process of redevelopment as well. And this is a good picture of what the annual Green Schools Conference looks like, and then also how the consortium engages many different perspectives in helping to select the schools that we work with, as well as inform the resources that are shared throughout the consortium. This is a diagram of the process, the schoolyard redevelopment process. First is a conceptual planning phase, and that's a full year, and that's where Zablocki is right now. So we're going to spend all of 2020 in the conceptual planning phase, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but you're in a cohort of 5 schools. So these are the other schools that are in the same boat as where you guys are. But ahead of you, there's a cohort 3, which is currently in the fundraising phase, and then cohort 2, which is going into construction as soon as next week, but really this summer. And there are 5 schools, Milwaukee Public Schools, that are going into construction because of the successes in the fundraising and the conceptual planning years ahead of them. Last year, we were able to raise $2.8 million to support the 5 schools going into construction this year. And that fundraising effort is a result of school fundraisers. It's a result of a lot of grant writing supported by MPS grants team and Reflow and the facilities team at MPS, and a lot of outreach to neighbors and supporting partners of each of these schools. So that's a significant effort that we're not going to talk too much about today because we're in the conceptual planning phase, but fundraising is what comes next. And again, that's going to be in 2021. And then there are schools that went through this multi-year effort, and we're going to look at a couple of those pictures just to explain what's going on with those schools as well. But throughout that redevelopment effort, there's lots of opportunities to engage community and students and staff and others. And so this is a picture in the top left of Longfellow Community School. They use the Earth Day activities to help celebrate green and healthy schools. We did a drone day where we had their entire school out on the school grounds to take a photo before and after. We also work with community design solutions at UWM in the School of Architecture. And their graduate students are working with each of these schools in Reflow to create these renderings that help to depict what these new spaces look like. And we're going to look at what the renderings look like for Zablocki in a moment. And then this top right picture is an example of the ability to write into the consultant contracts when engineers and architects get hired to come up with the detailed designs for these projects, that those are opportunities for students to be engaged with potential career pathways, as well as maintenance staff and other project partners to participate actively and meaningfully in the detailed design component as well. And it is important to celebrate the built projects, and that's a major component of what the conceptual planning and fundraising is that we really are striving towards making sure that the projects that we're talking about are feasible and they result in built projects. And so there's a lot of lessons learned from the previous cohorts of schools, but the feasibility is really important. And that's something we all want to keep in mind as we talk through the draft conceptual plans as well. And then here, this is a great picture of a student helping to document these projects as well. The couple next slides.
1 second.
Yeah.
Can you please let anyone in the waiting room in?
Oh, yeah. Let's do that. I don't know if the waiting room isn't enabled, so I don't have anyone in the waiting room.
Okay, I'll work on it. Thank you.
But this is an example from cohort 1 schools. This is Starm's Early Childhood Center. The top one is before, a lot of asphalt. They had some tot lot features. The after is a good example of mixing stormwater green infrastructure, in this case, a bioswale that helps to take the stormwater off of the adjacent parking lot and soak it in to the ground, and also to help treat that stormwater through different types of vegetation. Often that's native vegetation to Wisconsin, which has different root systems to help further soak in stormwater and treat that stormwater. And then we also have an example of porous pavement, because we want to make sure that there is hardscape for students to have play different types of ball games and different activities that require hardscape. But in this case, we also have this rubber surfacing, and we were able to work with artists to be able to depict Lake Michigan as a part of this, and then be able to install these boats that further connect that this is a water resource local to Milwaukee. And then here we were able to install these 3 slides that represent the 3 major river waterways in the Milwaukee area. And so this is a good example of connecting kind of geography lessons, art activities, along with stormwater green infrastructure, because this whole surface soaks in stormwater as well. And then these red balls are city nodes. And so students line up on Milwaukee or Chicago as opposed to lining up on 1, 2, 3 number lines. And so that's another connection that can be made. And then this feature also, this redevelopment also included some music elements and some new trees and an outdoor classroom, which is shown off the screen as well. This is Longfellow Community School. So that picture of all that asphalt from previous, they installed a new greenhouse that's down here, outdoor classroom / amphitheater space, bioswales again. And then in this case, this photo was taken before the synthetic turf field was finished, but there's a synthetic soccer field that has an underground cistern as a part of it as well, that stores about 20,000 gallons of stormwater in addition to soaking in the stormwater. And that's a lot. And we're also working with Longfellow and Hawley Environmental and their underground cistern, which is underneath their kickball field at Hawley, to be able to install some sensors that measure how much water is going into each of these different types of green infrastructure. So that could be connected to math and science activities at each of these schools. And in the case of Hawley, they had a significant interest in having native landscaping, which has a strong sensory component to it, and having some more outdoor classroom spaces and trees. And then Burdick is the last one I'm going to talk through. Is again a lot of asphalt beforehand, almost a city block worth. And in this case, we were able to replace about 60% of the asphalt with new green space that soaks in stormwater through a bioswale and some other features. There is a hill that's a little difficult to see in this image, but the hill adds some topography to the space, and also was an opportunity to plant some native landscaping. And then behind this tree and hoop house is an outdoor classroom and some more trees. And I do want to point out that we don't want to remove all of the asphalt because we do want to make sure there's opportunity for pavement games and other activities. Basketball is further back there. Just to talk about how we select schools real quickly before I ask Zablocki to just talk through their perspective on this. Each year, REFLO organizes a committee of the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee to help select which schools we work with. And so each year we have about 10 schools well, I back up. The schools fill out a 2-page application that are interested in going through this effort. And then we invite 10 schools to present to a committee of about 50 people representing different organizations and perspectives to ask them about each school's need and enthusiasm. And so each school has about 5 minutes to present, and then the consortium selects which schools to work with that are vetted through this process. And each year we work with 5. So with that being said, I would ask Mr. Coleman and Luis if you would be willing to just kind of mention why, what was the original need and enthusiasm that you shared with the Green Schools Consortium that we can just share with everyone and kind of remind everyone where Zablocki is coming from as we go through this planning process.
Yes, so we did talk about our 3 strategic priorities as a community school leadership team, and our need and our enthusiasm came from there. So the safe and welcoming environment is one of our strategic priorities. And so as you can see from the map here, that our playground is not very safe, not for our community members nor our children for recess. In the wintertime, you can see that from the first picture on your right, the playground slopes down, and the water or the snow will melt and slope down and then create a huge ice sheet. Kids are not able to utilize the playground then, or parents are not able to walk across the playground safely. So by redeveloping our schoolyard, then we are able to make that much more safe and much more welcoming. The health and wellness aspect of it, again, taking care of our students and our community members, their health, their mental health, being able to go to a place where they can sit, be a part of nature, talk, and then for our students that have disabilities, they are able to go out and to participate in some of the learning that they are being instructed in classrooms. So that is going to help with our health and mental wellness. And then just being a neighborhood center, a hub of the community, we intend on having, and you'll see this in the later renderings, we intend on having an outdoor stage so that community members can come and enjoy live entertainment. That will also be utilized as an outdoor classroom. So we want to make sure that all of the things that are taking place on our schoolyard are going to be fitting streamlined into our strategic priorities, which I think they will. Ms. Ludes, if you had anything.
I think you covered everything very eloquently.
I'm sorry, thank you.
No, you did great.
Yeah, and then you can look at the map too on the bottom right, and you can see that there are very limited green spaces in our area. So this is a need for the community. This is a need for Zablocki School, and we are so happy and so excited that we are embarking on this journey.
Awesome, thank you. So that's kind of a good transition. The journey part of it is, so this is a further expansion of that original graphic that communicated the major process. And if we're trying to focus on redeveloping that space and that construction, working with MPS facilities, they really want to target any construction to be over summer, so it has little or reduced impact to the academic year. And so looking at that, we would be looking, especially if it takes about a year to do the fundraising, a year for the conceptual planning, that would put us in the construction of over the summer of 2022. So that's, a good 2+ years before construction takes place. There's lots of opportunity here in the conceptual planning phase, all of 2020, to provide feedback. We're looking over the course of the next couple of weeks to try to get as much feedback as we possibly can so we can make some edits to the draft plan over summer. And then we can have another draft available in the beginning of the school year with the intent of finalizing the conceptual plan by the end of 2020. And then the intent with that is that we have a full understanding of what the plan is at Zablocki that includes all the things that we're all very interested in, including green infrastructure, outdoor classroom space, recreational components, community engagement, safety, all of the things, and include that in the conceptual plan so that we can use that plan to help to fundraise for the redevelopment that would happen the following year. And so this graphic tries to communicate, where we are in this yellow line here, but then also that come fall, there's plenty of opportunity for fundraising, and that will kind of shift gears here as we progress further along this process. To date, this page is all about what we've accomplished so far with the conceptual planning phase of development. And so that started off with taking some drone photos of the school grounds. We also worked with MPS facilities to obtain historical records. MPS has an archives room with all sorts of utility information and historical maps of every school in the district, which is really great. We circulated a schoolyard use survey with the intent of getting feedback from teaching staff, maintenance staff, parents, and students to try to understand what works on the school grounds, what doesn't work, and then also, what are some of the existing activities that are happening at the school so that we can support those and expand off of some existing strengths. And then we took a lot of that information and we sat down through our monthly green team meetings that took place all the way up until COVID hit. But we did have a chance to do a charrette, and that was really great with the school green team, as well as students that participated in that activity, which was awesome. And everyone kind of sketched different ideas. We talked through, the results of the schoolyard use survey, and then we took all those ideas, sketched them on paper, and then each of the small groups presented that to the larger group. And then what CDS, again, the graduate program at UWM did, working with Reflow, is took all those ideas, put them into one draft concept. In that one draft, last month, we sat down digitally with a small group at the green team at Zablocki. We got some feedback on that draft. And what we're about to review is the second draft. And so this is kind of a good opportunity for everyone else to see what's going on and what the ideas are. But again, it's draft and conceptual. So now is the time to be able to provide more feedback on what we're all talking about. With that being said, this is a good pausing point for questions. Are there any questions in the chat before we take a look at what the draft plans are? Okay, and then while we're maybe thinking about that, I'll also mention, because I forgot to mention in the beginning, is we are recording this again, and we also have a Spanish session. So all of this content will be translated in Spanish at 5 o'clock today, immediately after this. And then we'll also have both the English and Spanish version available for people to review digitally on the webpage that we have dedicated for Zablocki.
Justin, this is Jose. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When you look at a design, is there a percentage that you're looking at in converting into green space, or really the design is based on the need, and so there has to be some compromise? So my first question is, when you look at converting asphalt into green space, what percentage of that is your goal to convert into green space? Or is it based on the need of the school or the community in terms of the conversion into green space?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We really first we kind of think through some of the safety concerns, and we talk through where some of the ponding is happening. That's a good indication of where there may be some stormwater management issues going on. Because the stormwater is flowing downhill, we really start with trying to manage the stormwater, because if we put the stormwater green infrastructure on the upper part of that hill, it will have less of an impact than if we put it at the bottom of the hill. So that helps to kind of guide where some of these features are, and I can further explain that when we look at the draft plans. But we really start there with the stormwater management. The nice thing about stormwater green infrastructure and MMSD is that there's a lot of flexibility in what types of green infrastructure go in. And so based on the school, if there's a lot of use on the school grounds, we may say, we want this type of green infrastructure as opposed to that kind. And that plays into how much area that green infrastructure may take up. And I'll explain a little bit further about what that means specifically for Zablocki. But to go back to your point, it's really driven around the need and what the school is looking at and what are the other components. So sometimes it makes a lot of sense to integrate the outdoor classroom as a part of the green infrastructure. And depending on, if the school wants to have a performance space, that may not be the best to have in that space too. So that means that, that performing arts space maybe needs to be somewhere else. And so it's very iterative, and that's why this meeting today is really important to get feedback on what we're all talking about, making sure that we have all the right components and we're not impacting adversely any other thoughts on this. With that being said, there's one plan, and we I will qualify and say we just can't have everything. We can't have full soccer field and a full football field, and it's a limited space, and so we're trying to recognize all of those interests as well.
My follow-up question would be, I'm going to use the wrong term, but I'm assuming these are not holding ponds, but rather these are an avenue for normal absorption of water to occur that otherwise it would go into storm drains. Is that correct? And when you create these ponds or these holding grounds, is there like a filtration that is taken consideration to filter out some of the impurities? Or that's not necessarily the case when you create these holding ponds?
Yep. So the language that I'll use will be green infrastructure. And we, especially with school sites, we don't necessarily want to have ponding or a lot of ponding. That will become a hazard. And so what we're looking more at is like the bioswales. And bioswales are, depressions. So, some people may call them ditches, but they're depressions, and they have native plantings planted in them as well. And so those plantings will help to soak in stormwater through their roots, but they'll also, to use a technical term, evapotranspire some of that water as well. So they'll just kind of soak in that stormwater through the roots. But then also, because it's so heavily planted, that will also reduce how much standing water is visible in there as well. And so we really don't want to have standing water on a school site for sure for more than 24 hours. And any standing water would be designed so that it's only a couple of inches in a pretty severe rain event. But most times, stormwater will go through that bioswale, be treated through that vegetation. And then also in bioswales, there's the soil is special. It's engineered media so that it helps to filter out that stormwater before it either soaks into the ground or overflows into the sewer system. The other point on this, not to drive it too far, but Zablocki is in the combined sewer area. And so all of the stormwater that doesn't go into the ground ends up going into the sewer system, which is combined, and goes down to the wastewater treatment plant. So stormwater is further treated at Jones Island, in this case, at MMSD's water reclamation facility. In scenarios where it rains a lot, which we recently had, not today, but in the past month, those combined sewer systems can be overwhelmed with stormwater, which leads to combined sewer overflows, which is untreated stormwater, combined stormwater going into our water resources. So this project would help prevent that. Okay, any other questions before we look at the plans? Okay. So I'm gonna escape out of this. So in this document, what we've done here is we put, again, I'm gonna say, the more preferred format for this would all be in person. We'd have multiple boards, we'd answer questions and break up into small groups. With that being said, we have a digital replacement for the time being. And we are hoping that we can meet in person in fall, but we do feel it's important to get feedback early on right now. So kind of imagine this software that we're using is a means for people to provide Post-it notes and comments on what we're all looking at. And so here I'm just going to do this. I'm going to walk us first through the draft conceptual plan, and then I'm going to walk us through how to use this software so everyone can start to provide some comments on this. But here's Zablocki. North is to the right over here. And then this is the back. So right now this is all, for the most part, I shouldn't say all, but for the most part, asphalt. And some of the major features that we're talking about, I'm going to zoom in here. There's a blue dot right down here, and all of that stormwater from the parking lot and the existing asphalt all drains to one point down here. And so kind of what I just mentioned about kind of driving from the stormwater management perspective, what we're showing here in this dark green color is a bioswale here that will help to soak in the stormwater. And then we're talking about removing asphalt and putting in a synthetic turf soccer field. And we are talking about synthetic, or the AstroTurf, which is a brand, because of how popular we know the soccer field will be, both by the school and the surrounding community. And so that synthetic turf field does cost more, but it will be more resilient than what more like a natural turf field would be. And then that synthetic turf field, just like the Longfellow example I showed, offers the opportunity to be able to store additional stormwater underneath that soccer field through some large scale cisterns. In this case, it's shown by a dotted box here. So those are those two features, which being shown here is kind of a hill or a little berm. That berm would only be a couple of feet high, so it doesn't, the intent is not to impede visuals or sight lines to the site, so it's not like students or anything could hide behind the hill, but it does provide a little bit of a backstop to the soccer, as well as helps to manage the construction excavation of the soils that would accommodate here. We can manage that on site, which helps to reduce the construction costs. We want to keep the existing basketball court, the full basketball court, because that's really popular and looks really great and fits really nicely where it is. What we will want to show here is that that people can walk, students and community members can walk adjacent to that basketball field. So I'm gonna in a moment show how to make a comment about that. But we are showing a bioswale and tree plantings here that takes stormwater off of the parking lot and helps to soak it in before it gets connected to this other bioswale as well. This feature down here, there's an existing green spot with some trees that are already here on the existing schoolyard. And what we wanted to do is remove more asphalt and add more of like a sensory garden space. This would be planted with native plants. One student had brought up the idea of having lavender planted in there to help act as a calming space for students during recess and during other activities. And so this is intended to support that. Again, another hill feature or berm feature with trees. And then we are keeping a lot of the existing asphalt. So this whole area is all existing asphalt that would remain in place. What the plan is showing is that it would be seal coated, which would essentially erase all of the line work that's out there now and replace it with this new line work. These would be Foursquare and Hopscotch. And then this blue line represents the Kinnickinnick River. And so because of the connection as a community school and connection with 16th Street Community Health Center and the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, this was kind of a really cool concept to help connect local water resources to the school grounds. And then also what's indicated here, that there could be markings to indicate different streets, and then maybe students line up on different street names before they go back into the school. Also, the markings could be created to help, during recess to also have kickball. Again, Foursquare. This feature here is a Gaga ball pit. For those that aren't familiar, it's a kind of a small dodgeball activity, much smaller. There's a lot of students that participate, but it's intended to be more inclusive because it's not, overhand throwing kickballs, it's more of like a rolling activity, and it's really popular with students. So that's what we're talking about there. And then I'm just going to kind of slide over. There was significant interest in helping to redevelop the front of the school grounds as well. And there's a lot of existing green space, really great mature trees. And so we wanted to expand on that first by putting in an outdoor classroom space that had a stage. So that could also double as a performing arts space. And to support that outdoor classroom and maybe some of the conversations that would happen there, the thought would be to put in some berms and native landscaping behind that to help buffer some of the sound from the major road to the south, but ideally not impair too much of the sight line, so we're not providing spaces for hiding, but more like sound reducing features or buffering features. And then also this dotted line here that's shown would be decorative fencing that further secures this corner of the school grounds, so it feels safer and we don't feel like students are going to be running out this way towards the street. This decorative fencing, not necessarily chain link, would help to further secure this big quarter of the school grounds. Right now there is not a path, but the intent is to put in a crushed red granite pathway here that also allows for more accessibility to the front of the schoolyard or school building. We're talking crushed red granite because that would be wheelchair accessible. And then to the southwest, there's some existing raised bed garden features. The plan is to expand on that, so there's a healthy food access component. Also to potentially expand the fencing around the existing tot lot, to respect the existing memorial that's on the corner and also bus stop. We're not, we're trying to respect that space and not necessarily change anything about that. And I think those are the major components. I'm just going to show some visual perspectives that CDS put together, which is really great. These renderings are intended to help further communicate what's going on with each of these different spaces. So this is that outdoor classroom space in the front of the school. Here again, that berm feature and some of that native landscaping. But what's effectively being shown here is that you can see over those plantings and over that berm, and you can still see what's going on there. CDS is also showing the fencing, which is really great. And then also making sure that the stage is ADA accessible as well. And just slide over a little bit further. This is taking that drone photo with a rendering over the top of it. And so here that bioswale is kind of the same stuff that we're talking about, just shown in a little different way. So again, bioswale, there's some existing trees to further support those. That existing basketball, leave that. But add a new soccer field, some additional trees, and that more sensory, quiet space. And then one last rendering to show off. This is of the school grounds as well. And here's that some benches. In the background here is Gaga Ball, and looking. Here's the asphalt markings. Something I should be clear about is that blue line is not, water. That's actually asphalt. That's painted line work on the asphalt. Okay, so those are some renderings, and just kind of zooming out here. So before we open up for questions, I'm just going to explain a couple ways to provide feedback on this, and then we're going to kind of open it up and ask for thoughts and comments on this. So this software that we're using, this Idea Flip, we've structured this in a way that we're asking people to provide questions that they may have in this box. So one question I'm just going to show you, when you may open it, on the far right, you may see these tabs. And if you click this stationary tab, you'll see a big long list of options for people to select. For our purposes, I'm just going to select any one of these Post-it notes, any color, it doesn't matter. So a good example of this, I'm just dragging and dropping here. And so if I have a question, a good question is, how many spaces are in the outdoor classroom, right? I'll also mention that when I click to the details, I can see who created this Post-it note. So if there are questions that are really specific, we can follow up with that individual as well. So I'm just gonna hit okay. So that's a question. If people like certain features, that's really important to understand as well. So if you really like the connection with local water resources, please say that. That's really helpful to understand. So maybe we can further expand on some of those components as well. So connection to water resources. There we go. And we can get the spelling right later. Resources, there we go. Okay, so that's that. If people, want to further support what's going on, feel free to explore some of these stationary items on the far right. If you scroll down, you can, add thumbs up to certain features. If you don't agree with a certain feature, go for it, thumbs down. That's great if you want to respond that way. And then if anyone has ideas for how to improve it or certain features, please provide that as well. One thing I can see right off the bat here, and again, this is draft, I think we should show walking paths, paths to the basketball court. So in my mind, that's just not necessarily showing bioswale making this turn right here, but showing that as that crushed red granite again to show that people can walk from this way all the way to the basketball court. And then if you have comments or thoughts about these perspectives, please feel free to drop Post-it notes in there as well. So with that being said, we can open it up to questions. I'm gonna, in the meantime, I'm gonna share this link in the comments window. So anyone can log in and start filling out or responding this way. And I will just mention here that this is not the only way that people can provide feedback as well. So there's the link for it. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer while everyone kind of logs into IdeaFlip? I'd be happy to answer them. And then I'll also say that there's a Google form that people can respond through as well. And so here we're asking for people's names and email addresses. This is optional. You don't have to do both of these options, IdeaFlip and the form. But this form allows you to download all the images we just reviewed. Same question, what do you like? This also helps you to kind of grade what things you like most, or if you're not interested in certain features, that's helpful to note as well. What do you think should change? And then here, this is really important feedback as well. Who else should we invite to provide perspective on the plan? If you know of particular stakeholders, please share that with us so Zablocki can reach out and Reflow can support that activity. The best feedback on this route is specific. So if you know of a certain neighbor, please provide contact information, or if you want to reach out to them, please do so. Again, what we're going to be doing as I flip back to this is, we want to share these links in this recorded webinar, but also we also want to reach out to people for the fall in-person meeting as well. Okay. With that being said, are there any thoughts or questions I can respond to via the webinar? Otherwise, you can provide questions and thoughts in either IdeaFlip or the Google form as well.
Justin, there's a couple questions in the chat that you might wanna, that you could probably address.
Okay. Considerations for winter plowing. So that's a good question. I'm going to jump back to this. So MPS policy is to plow only around the building and around school entrances. So unless there's something being done differently on the school grounds that wouldn't typically be plowed. But that is something of interest. As a part of this redevelopment, we would want to make sure we're addressing the ponding issues that were indicated previously as well. But winter plowing, that is something that would be communicated with MPS facilities and the engineering staff at the school to make sure that any features are not impacted by plowing activities if they do take place on the school grounds. Something that we are exploring with the other schools is putting in bollards around some of the more sensitive infrastructure, so that if there is a plow in some future date, that plows know where not to go as a part of the redevelopment. Other questions?
Hi,
Yeah.
good afternoon. This is Dr. Griesbach and also Mr. Galvan, regional team for the Southwest region. So glad to be here and super excited that Zablocki School is one of our green schools. Thank you, Mr. Hagerty. We're very, very proud and honored. So Mr. Galvan, go ahead.
Hey, hello everybody. How are you all? I know I recognize most of you. So Justin, really quickly, in terms of when we talk about fundraising, and I know we're just at the beginning of the process, but is there a number that the goal is? Is there an expectation for the school? Because I know that always kind of is where we can and can't do things, is dependent upon how much money we have available.
Yep. So that's a very good point. So fundraising at this point is all fundraising. So this isn't necessarily being the funds for this aren't necessarily coming from a large school budget somewhere or a district budget. This is all grant supported. It's supported by school fundraisers and also project partners. So a lot of donations that come through corporate sponsorships. So it is, Mr. Galvan, your point about success in the fundraising year is really important, because all of these things are maybe feasible, but if we can't raise the funds for it, then it won't happen. So that is why we do have a full year dedicated, or a year plus dedicated to fundraising. To that end, each school is different. Schools have different sizes, different components. With that being said, they've ranged between $300,000 to $600,000 for a redevelopment. Over summer, as we condense some of the comments on this, I will work with facilities team to put together a rough cost estimate of how much we think this particular redevelopment will cost. And when I do that with facilities, we use what we're seeing from construction this year and the previous cohorts as well. So the information we're putting into that is informed from actual construction costs. With that being said, the other part of your question was, how much do we expect for the school to put into the fundraising effort? What we've talked about through the Green Schools Consortium is setting kind of a floor to that number of being about $10,000 for each school. $10,000 seems to be a healthy floor of the fundraising for each school. Some schools are able to raise, 100,000 plus. And those schools are able to get the outdoor classroom and all of the other features, and they're very motivated to do that. And that's excellent. Some schools, not every school has access to the same resources, and we want to recognize that. And we do still think that $10,000 is reasonable for all of those schools that may not have the same access to resources as well.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Coleman, I had a little experience working with Justin. He does a great job. So we'll be talking more about some of these processes.
Yes. Mr. Hagerty, just one other comment or question. Is it possible that Mr. Coleman will have the opportunity? I've worked as a supervisor for your other schools that you've had in other regions, that Mr. Coleman will be able to have feedback on the plan from other people, other principals that have gone through this process. Like, for example, now Mr. Galvan was at View, like Ms. Sarah is at Longfellow. So I think it would be helpful, because as a new principal going back, I just feel like this glaze that's like, wow, I love this. But when you see like the raised beds, we know that the leadership entailed with weed beds that come if you don't have a strong grasp on what that looks like for planning and preparation and teacher capacity building. So is there an opportunity for feedback on this plan for principals that have also walked through this journey? you know, just to make sure that it's a good fit for Zablocki.
Yeah,
Just
that's
something for consideration.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So the intent with that effort was the Green Schools Conference each year. This year was going to be the 5th annual, and it was going to be in August 6th. And actually was going to be at Longfellow. The intent being that we could, you know, have all of the principals and green teams from all of these schools gather at a schoolyard that's been redeveloped and interact with their green team, provide feedback on that. Unfortunately, the Green Schools Conference due to COVID has been canceled for this year. So that's difficult. What we have been talking about in the past was being able to facilitate a tour of schools that have gone through this. And we've done this effort in a couple of other contexts where we have like a short bus with 20 or so people, and we do a short tour to talk with the principals on their school grounds, because seeing the school grounds, that's like a whole nother perspective as well. That's really important. But those are two means for doing that. With COVID, that's a really good point. I think we may need to adjust strategies. Maybe we can facilitate some sort of online discussion. We can definitely provide the contact information for principals that have gone through this. I know Mr. Galvan, so Escuela View and Bradley Tech were in the pilot year. That was different. So the pilot was all focused on green infrastructure. And we learned a lot with Escuela View and Bradley Tech. Things have evolved so that it's more of a holistic schoolyard redevelopment. So we're able to include the outdoor classroom and some of these other features. We've also heard from principals and teachers that they want more support on to your point, the maintenance and the stewardship component. And so as a part of that, working with the consortium, Reflow and our high school students have built these outdoor discovery carts that include a list of lesson plans and maintenance components like gloves and all sorts of other things that can be used to help maintain these new spaces. And our intent is to be able to provide each school that goes through this with kind of a shot in the arm with this outdoor discovery cart that helps promote outdoor learning as well as the maintenance.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Hagerty. We're very, very appreciative. You've done such great work all along, and to your team. This is such wonderful work. We're super excited about the work and the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin, can you have a little more discussion about the path around the soccer field? We know there's an entrance there and that people enter at the gate. So we were thinking they could enter and walk across the field, but should we shift it so you can actually walk around it? Just a little more feedback on that. There's several comments in the chat and on the board about wanting a pathway around the soccer field.
Gotcha. Yeah, we can, we'll follow up with that one. And the reason I'm gonna hedge on this is because we're coming up on 5 o'clock and we have the Spanish version of this session at 5 o'clock. So I don't wanna keep any of our Spanish speakers waiting at 5 o'clock, but we will definitely address that over the coming month and talk more about what that means. But we do want to make sure that this entrance is maintained if the school would like to do that, and it makes sense with facilities. We will, please do keep continuing to provide these comments. We will, so I'm going to transition here to, we would like to get as much feedback as possible by June 12th, about 2 weeks from now. Please share this with anyone else that you think is appropriate. Immediately after this meeting concludes, Lisa's going to send out an email that has all of these links, and please just forward that on to community members or others that are appropriate to see this. I will follow up again with the principal and the kind of the other connections with the other schools. I think that's a really great idea. And then as we have more time to digest some of the feedback that's coming in right now, we'll follow up next month with more responses to some of this stuff. Okay. With that being said, if anyone wants to jump over to the Spanish version, it's a different link. We can totally do that, but please continue to fill in the feedback form here, as well as the idea flip. That's not going to close for another 2 weeks. Okay. Cool. So Mr. Coleman and Luis, if you can join us over on the Spanish version of this conversation, that would be much appreciated. Lisa can send us a link so that's at the top of your email as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for your input, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you coming. Justin, how long did you say the link was going to be available?
We're going to ask everyone to provide feedback within the next 2 weeks. We can make accommodations if we need to translate this to other languages. If anyone needs to provide more opportunity for this, we understand this is digital and that's not the best format, but we're hoping for 2 weeks so that we can use that right away and start making some updates to this plan this summer.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.